The crowd roared as dust rose from the arena floor. Under the scorching Texas sun, a massive black stallion kicked and twisted, eyes wide with fury. No one dared come close. From the far edge of the fence line, an old man stood still, watching. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. And for the first time all day, the horse stopped and stared back. People leaned forward, puzzled by the sudden stillness. The stallion, known as Blackjack, had already bucked off 6 riders. One had left in an ambulance, another in tears, and yet for some reason he now stood frozen, staring at a man who hadn't even crossed the fence. From the VIP stand, Clint Maddox, the owner of the event and the horse, smirked and raised his voice. 150 grand to anyone who can last 5 minutes on that devil. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Riders lined up, each one confident, cocky, doomed. But the old man stayed by the fence, hands folded, saying nothing, just watching. His name was Walter Jennings. No one knew him, no one cared, but he had come with a purpose. This is a story about memory, instinct, and the bond no one saw coming. And that afternoon, the past began to breathe again. Walter Jennings hadn't always been invisible. Years ago, people knew his name, at rodeos, in stables, across the dry lands of Texas. He'd trained horses, real ones, not pampered showpieces, but animals born in storms and tempered by silence. But that life was gone now. He lived in a fading farmhouse just outside of Abilene with his granddaughter Emily. Since the accident that took her parents, he'd been both guardian and anchor. Days were quiet. Mornings started with oatmeal and ended with old jazz on a dusty radio. They lived on his pension and whatever they could grow in the backyard. Walter didn't talk much about the past. He had one photo framed in the living room. Him, younger, holding the reins of a dark colt. Emily had asked once, "Who's the horse?" He'd only said, "That one had a fire in him, strong but scared." That morning, Emily had run in from town, waving a bright yellow flyer. "Grandpa, look at this. A big competition at the Maddox Ranch today. Prize money. A lot of it." He didn't answer right away. He took the flyer, squinted at the details. His fingers froze when he saw the photo of the horse, Blackjack. But Walter knew that face, the posture, the eyes, shadow. He ran his hand down the paper, slowly, like touching a wound that had never closed. "You know that horse?" Emily asked. He nodded, but softly. "He used to be mine." She stared at him. "You should go. You could win." Walter shook his head. "It's not about winning." Later that afternoon, he stood quietly by the edge of the arena, dressed in worn jeans and a hat older than most of the crowd. People passed him without a second glance. Some whispered. Some laughed. Look at the old timer, probably looking for a place to sit, not to ride. He heard it all, but his eyes never left the horse. Something in Blackjack's gait, in the way he jerked his head and pounded the dirt. It wasn't rage. It was fear wrapped in memory. And Walter, he recognized it, as if part of himself were trapped inside that wild body. Walter stayed by the fence as another rider was helped off the dirt, limping and cursing. The crowd laughed and cheered, hungry for more failure. Clint Maddox leaned against the railing of his private box, whiskey in hand, amused by the spectacle. "Come on!" he yelled. "Is there anyone left with a spine?" Walter's grip tightened on the flyer in his pocket. Emily's face flashed in his mind, hopeful, tired, too young to carry the weight of lost parents. She deserved a better future than what he could offer. College, a chance to leave the dust behind. He stepped toward the entry gate. A board attendant raised an eyebrow. "Name? Walter Jennings. You're serious?" Walter nodded. "Just write it down, son." The attendant chuckled, scribbled the name. "Good luck, Gramps. Try not to break a hip." Back in the holding pen, Blackjack paced, head jerking, muscles twitching. The handlers had used tighter restraints this time, shorter lead ropes, rougher commands. One of them whipped the air too close, and the stallion reared violently, almost snapping the post. "Damn thing's lost his mind," a stable hand muttered. "Ought to put him down." Walter heard it, and it burned in his chest. No, he thought, he's not crazy, he remembers. He remembered the day he had to sell Shadow. After the drought wiped out his crops and the bank took the land, he'd sold the colt to a buyer from upstate. Fast money, no questions. He'd never forgiven himself. Walter hadn't seen him again, until now. Each failed attempt in the arena drove Clint's grin wider. "Told y'all," he boomed. "He's unrideable. He doesn't trust anyone." But trust, Walter knew, didn't vanish. It waited. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the arena, Walter walked back toward Emily, who was sitting alone near the edge of the stands. "You really gonna try?" she asked, her voice small. He nodded. "But you could get hurt." Walter knelt beside her. "When I lost him, it was like losing a part of myself. But I let him down first. I didn't fight for him. I walked away." Emily's eyes filled. "Then maybe this is your chance." He smiled faintly. "Or maybe it's his." They hugged, tight. No words, just a shared truth between generations. Then the loudspeaker cracked to life. "Next rider, Walter Jennings." The laughter returned, louder this time. Someone shouted, "Get the medic ready!" But Walter didn't flinch. He stepped through the gate and Blackjack turned his head. Something changed. The crowd hadn't noticed yet, but the horse had. Before Walter could even reach the center of the arena, another rider, young, broad-shouldered, full of bravado, shoved past him. "Step aside, old man. Let the real cowboys show how it's done." The announcer, caught in the excitement, didn't correct the order. The gate burst open, and the crowd held their breath. Blackjack exploded. The rider lasted 4 seconds. He flew through the air like a rag doll, landing hard near the edge of the rail. People gasped, then clapped. 4 seconds! Clint laughed. "Not bad. Who's next to get thrown like laundry?" Walter didn't react. He simply stepped forward again, quietly, like nothing had happened. A few people noticed now, how he moved like he'd done this before. No showmanship, no arrogance, just purpose. Inside the pen, Blackjack paced restlessly, foam around his mouth, one back leg stained with a smear of dried blood. No one had even bothered to clean it. His ears twitched at every shout, every whistle. They'd been trying to break him, not reach him. Walter stood by the chute gate, hat in hand. "Sir," one of the handlers said, "this horse ain't safe." "You sure about this?" Walter didn't answer. He stepped up to the platform, placed a hand on the rail, and looked into the stallion's eyes. They stared at each other across steel and dust, and for a moment, neither moved. Then, the gate creaked open. The silence that fell over the arena was almost unnatural. The wind stopped. The crowd held their breath. Walter stepped inside. Blackjack didn't charge. He didn't rear. He blinked. Walter took one slow step forward, then another. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't call. He simply approached, like someone returning home. Someone shouted, "He's gonna die!" Someone else laughed nervously, "Where's his helmet?" But Walter kept walking. When he was just a few feet away, he paused, lowered his head slightly, whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry, boy. I should have never let you go." Blackjack snorted. The muscles in his shoulders twitched. His hooves scraped the dirt. Walter moved closer, slow, soft, until he was at the stallion's side. He reached out. Fingers brushed fur. No movement, no lunge, just stillness. Clint leaned over the edge of his box. "What the hell is happening?" The crowd went quiet again. Walter ran his hand along Blackjack's neck, speaking softly. "I called you Shadow, remember that? You weren't mean. You were scared, and I was supposed to protect you." The stallion exhaled deeply, ears relaxing slightly. Walter stepped toward the saddle and slowly, painfully, climbed up. Every movement careful, like a ritual. He sat, and Blackjack didn't move, didn't buck, didn't twist. Someone in the crowd dropped a drink. No one noticed. 5 seconds passed. 10, 15. Walter gently took the reins and guided the horse in a slow circle. Blackjack obeyed. Murmurs spread like wildfire. People stood, craning their necks. "No way," someone whispered. "Is he riding him?" "He's riding him," By the time they completed a second turn, the announcer had lost his voice. Walter looked out over the arena, eyes glazed but focused, his posture steady, his voice soft. He's not broken, he's remembering. Then Clint's voice boomed again, furious, sharp. This is rigged. He slammed his glass down. Get him off that horse. He's cheating. Walter dismounted. Blackjack stayed by his side, as if waiting. A handler rushed forward. Sir, are you okay? Walter looked at him with tired but peaceful eyes. I'm better than I've been in years. In the stands, people slowly began to applaud. Not all at once. Just a ripple of something they hadn't expected to feel. Respect. And as Walter left the arena, Blackjack followed him. No rope, no command, just trust. Have you ever seen a moment when an animal remembered something no one else could see? When instinct looked a lot like love? If you've witnessed something like that, or felt it, drop a comment below. Sometimes, the most powerful bonds aren't the loud ones. They're the ones that survive in silence, until the heart finally speaks. Blackjack stood beside Walter like a shadow rediscovered. Clint Maddox stormed into the arena, flanked by two assistants. This is a setup, he barked. That horse has been sedated or something. This is a damn trick. Walter didn't flinch. You don't sedate a memory, son, Clint scoffed. You think that's your horse? That thing's been nothing but trouble since I bought him. Walter turned toward Blackjack, ran a hand down his mane. You bought his body. But his soul, that never belonged to you. The crowd had gone from amused to invested. Someone in the stands yelled, "Let him talk!" Another added, "He earned it!" Walter looked around, not to bask in the moment, but to anchor himself. His name was Shadow. I raised him from a colt, fed him with a bottle. He got sick once, nearly died. I stayed up 3 nights with a blanket and a prayer. He paused. Then the bank came. I lost the farm. Had to sell him. Never saw him again. Until today. Clint stepped forward. You think some sob story makes you his owner? You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine? Walter's voice dropped. I don't want to fight. I just wanted to know if he still remembered. Blackjack moved slightly, nudged Walter's shoulder with his nose, and in that moment every doubt vanished. No cue, no trick. Just a horse who knew exactly who he was beside. Clint looked down, suddenly unsure. Walter gave the reins one last gentle tug and whispered, We'll go if you let us. But Blackjack didn't wait for permission. He stepped forward toward the exit gate, with Walter by his side, and not one soul in that arena moved to stop them, because deep down, they understood. This wasn't a man riding a horse. It was something older than pride. Older than pain, a bond that time forgot but never erased. Outside the arena, people gathered like dust around a storm that had suddenly stilled. Riders who once scoffed now stood silent, hats in hand. Someone offered Walter a bottle of water, another a handshake. He accepted neither, not out of pride, but because he hadn't done it for applause. Emily ran to him, arms tight around his waist. She was crying. Not from fear now, but something deeper. Relief, maybe. Understanding. You did it, she whispered. Walter smiled faintly. No, sweetheart, we did. Blackjack stood beside them, calm as moonlight. No reins needed. He sniffed Emily's shoulder, then leaned gently into her. She giggled through her tears. Grandpa, he remembers me too? Walter nodded. He remembers love. Across the fence, the crowd slowly began to clap. Not the mocking kind, not the showy kind. The slow, growing applause of people who just witnessed something they didn't have words for. Even the announcer, still holding his mic, had nothing to say. For the first time in his career, he let the silence carry the story. A few cameras filmed, but the energy wasn't about spectacle anymore. It was reverence. Clint Maddox, red-faced and pacing, spat into the dirt. That's enough. This circus is over. He called for the handlers. Get that horse back in the stall, now. But no one moved. Not the staff. Not the crowd. Not Blackjack. Walter took a step toward Clint. You had your show. You made your money. But that horse is done with you. Clint stepped down from the box, walked straight toward them. You think you can just take him? Walter stood his ground. No, I think he already chose. Behind them the sun was setting, the sky burned orange over the horizon, and Blackjack, calm, still, faithful, stood not beside a winner, but beside someone who never stopped being his. And that was something no one could buy. Clint wasn't done. "I'll have you arrested," he growled. "The horse is registered under my ranch. You can't just walk off with him like a trophy." Walter didn't raise his voice. "I don't want a trophy. I want what's right." Clint laughed bitterly. "What's right? You're broke. You've got nothing. You think a story and some soft eyes change that?" Walter sighed. "You're right. I am broke. But that horse isn't yours, Clint. Not in the way that matters." Then came the threat. "I'll sue. You'll lose whatever's left of that dusty little house you call home." Emily flinched, looking up at her grandfather. But Walter didn't break. He walked over to the saddlebag, took out the prize envelope. Slowly, he handed it to Clint. "Keep it." Clint blinked. "Excuse me? I didn't come here for your money," Walter said. "I came to give him a choice, and he made it." People gasped. Some murmured in disbelief. Clint opened the envelope, stared at the check, then back at Walter. "You're serious?" Walter nodded. "He was my only family before Emily. I raised him. I failed him. I thought this might be my chance to make it right." Clint hesitated. For once, no words, just confusion. Emily stepped forward, voice trembling. "We don't want anything from you. We just want to go home. With him." The crowd had turned. The mood was no longer on Clint's side. A man near the fence muttered, "Let him go, Maddox." Another added, "You lost. Fair and clean." Clint looked at Blackjack, at the calm in his eyes, then back at the two people he had tried to humiliate. And in that moment, he saw something he couldn't understand, something he'd never be able to control. He stepped back. "Fine, take him. But if I see that horse again, I'll—" Walter raised a hand, not in threat but in peace. "You won't." He turned away, and Blackjack followed, not because he had to, but because he never forgot where he truly belonged. They didn't speak much on the drive home. Walter drove the old truck with both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale, eyes distant. Emily sat beside him, her hand resting quietly on Blackjack's halter, which stretched through the open rear window where the horse walked behind, calm, unled, and free. When they pulled up to the farmhouse, the front porch sagging in places, the fields bone dry, Walter paused. The sky was dimming again, deep purple like it had been that evening years ago, the day he let Shadow go. Now he was back. He stepped down from the truck and faced the animal. "It ain't what it used to be, boy, but it's still home." Blackjack nickered softly, ears forward. Emily ran inside and returned with a faded blanket, the same one Walter used all those years ago to keep Shadow warm during a winter freeze. She handed it to her grandfather like a ceremony. Walter laid the blanket over Blackjack's back, not to ride, but to say, "You're safe now." That night, he sat on the porch, Emily asleep inside, the screen door creaking softly behind him. Blackjack lay just beyond the steps, stretched out in the dirt like he had done when he was a colt. Walter whispered to the wind, "I thought time would erase me from him." But he remembered. He tilted his head back, tears catching in the corners of his eyes. "I remembered, too." The next morning, a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway. Clint Maddox stepped out, this time without his entourage, without his swagger. Just a hat in his hand and a face changed by silence. Walter didn't rise from his chair. Clint walked forward, stopped a few feet from the porch. "I came to buy him back," he said plainly. "Double the prize." Walter shook his head. "Not for sale. Triple." "No." A long pause. Clint looked at the horse grazing nearby, then back at the man he'd underestimated. "You know," Clint muttered, "I've trained 1,000 horses, but yesterday, that wasn't training." Walter finally looked up. "No, that was trust." Clint nodded slowly, then offered a strange half-smile, more humility than regret. "You taught me something. Don't know what to do with it yet, but thank you." Walter gave a soft nod. "You're welcome." Clint turned to leave. As he walked back to his car, Blackjack lifted his head but didn't move, just watched, calm, rooted, as if to say, "We're good now." When the SUV disappeared down the road, Walter stepped off the porch. Blackjack met him halfway. No rope, no saddle, just presence. He placed a hand on the horse's face, leaned in. "You're home now." And then something quiet, simple but eternal, happened. Blackjack closed his eyes and exhaled. It wasn't the breath of a beast tamed. It was the breath of something found. That moment, the old man, the once lost horse, the porch soaked in early sunlight, wasn't for crowds or cameras. It was for them. The kind of reunion that didn't need words, just time, forgiveness, and the love that outlives both. Weeks passed. The ranch didn't grow richer. The porch still creaked. The paint still peeled. But inside the house, laughter returned. Emily, once quiet and watchful, now filled the rooms with music and stories. She studied hard, hopeful again. And outside, Blackjack wandered freely across the pasture. No fences, no fear, just belonging. Neighbors stopped by now and then, bringing pie or questions or just silence. They came not to gawk, but to witness something rare. Some asked Walter how he did it, how he rode the horse no one else could touch. He always answered the same. "I didn't ride him. I remembered him. And he remembered me." One day, the local elementary school invited him to speak. Emily insisted he go. So he put on a clean shirt, tucked in tight, and brought along an old photo. Him and Shadow, both younger, both new to the world. In the classroom, a boy raised his hand. "Weren't you scared?" Walter paused. "Every day," he said. "But love, real love, doesn't erase fear. It gives you something bigger to hold on to." Back at home that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Blackjack stood by the porch again, not looking for food, not waiting for a command. Just there. Walter stepped outside, sat slowly in his chair, and let the quiet settle. The kind of quiet that feels earned. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Because some lessons aren't shouted, they're lived. And in that yard, on that porch, under that endless sky, something had shifted. A man once forgotten had found his place again, and beside him, a horse once feared had simply become what he always was. Home. Maybe you know someone like Walter. Someone who was overlooked, doubted, dismissed, until the moment their quiet strength became impossible to ignore. Or maybe there's a part of you that still remembers something lost, something worth reclaiming. If this story touched something in you, take a second to leave a comment. Share it with someone who might need a little hope today. A reminder that age doesn't dim the soul, that love doesn't vanish with time. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from? I'd love to know how far stories like this can travel, how far the memory of a bond can reach. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Until next time, take care of your people and never forget the ones who never forgot you.